Hello, here's another tutorial by Sophia. This is a fun Halloween themed Nightmare Before Christmas acrylic painting. Hope you enjoy it. The materials you will need for this painting are a pencil and an eraser and a pencil sharpener if needed. I will be using some masking tape to tape the edges of the paper to give it a border, but that's optional. I'm using heavy-duty watercolor paper. You can also use a canvas. You'll need your palette, either plastic or glass works well. You'll also need some various size brushes. In particular, you will need a bigger brush for the background and a small detail brush as well. And I'm using these little acrylics here. You'll also need your jar of water and a paper towel. I just taped up my edges here, so I measured each length of tape first to make sure that it goes the whole width of the paper, and just carefully lined it up with each edge. I'm going to start by tracing a circle for the moon background. So I just went to my kitchen and picked out a bowl that fits the paper well. You can also use a jar or a plate, or just look around your house for anything circular that fits well on your page. So I'm just holding it down and lightly tracing around. And I placed it kind of further up on my page and left some more space on the bottom. Next, I'm going to draw the Swirly Mountain. So I'm just going to overlap that circle and form a spiral right in the center and the bottom of the circle there. Then I'm starting at the point and I'm following that same spiral and then bringing that line back out the opposite direction. And I wanted to just kind of adjust that a bit, so don't be afraid to erase and start over. Also, if you want to practice doing spirals on a separate piece of paper first, that can be helpful too. Just darkening up some of my lines. Then I'm going to erase that part of the circle that overlaps the mountain there. I'm going to add another little mountain in the background there. Then I can start with Jack's outline. So you can either start with the head or the legs, whatever works best for you. I decided to start with the head first. And I didn't really like how that one turned out, so I erased him and decided to start over. And this time I decided to start with the legs instead to get the proportions better. So he's got long, thin legs. I'm going to add his jacket, his shoulders, and then his head last. And I found that that way was more helpful than starting with his head, so that I could get the length of his body right. I'm going to add his front arm at a L shape, then his back arm flows out the other way. Adding some long fingers. Again, I'm just keep adjusting the proportions until I feel like it looks right. Just darkening some lines. And I'm going to add 0. I'm going to start with 0's little snout, his front leg, and then the back part's just spirals, kind of curves under him. Add his long ears flowing behind him, and just keep touching it up until you feel like it looks right. Also, working from a reference picture is super helpful, so if you want to pull up a picture of Jack in 0, that is super helpful for me. I'm going to add some little pumpkins in the background here. You can add whatever you want. You could add some tombstones or spider webs, make it your own. And then lastly, I'm going to add Oogie Boogie's face in the mountain there. So one eye is significantly larger than the other eye, and they're kind of this almond shape. So again, one eye much bigger. And then for the mouth, I'm just gonna do 2 squiggly lines. So there's the top one, and then the bottom squiggly line. And then that's it for the drawing. Once you're ready to start painting, I'm gonna start with the yellow moon background. So I'm gonna put a good amount of yellow on my palette, and I'm also gonna mix it with white to lighten it up a bit. Just gonna mix those together, and I'm using a pretty wide brush because I have a big surface area to cover. So I'm gonna carefully go around the perimeter of the circle there. And don't worry about overlapping your pencil lines. The yellow is thin and light enough color that you'll still be able to see your drawing through the paint. So like you can see, I'm just covering up Jack. Otherwise it would be pretty difficult to paint around him. And then you can barely see it in the video, but I could see the outline of Jack perfectly fine through the yellow paint. Next, I'm going to do the black background. So I'm cleaning my brush really well, getting all of that yellow out. Then I'm also going to dry it completely on a paper towel. You don't want very much moisture in your brush. So then again, I'm going to just cover the rest of the page all the way to the edge of either the tape or the paper. So I'm making sure to overlap all of the borders, and then very carefully outlining that circle. So just try to have a steady hand and follow along that curve that you drew earlier. Next, I'm gonna paint the Oogie Boogie Mountain. So I'm gonna get some purple. If you don't have purple, you can mix it using blue and red. About equal proportions. If you want it more of a pinky purple, add more red. If you want it a darker purple, add more blue. And then you can barely even see that it's purple over the video, so I decided to add some white to brighten that purple up a bit. I'm using a smaller brush now to mix that. Then I decided to actually start with black for Oogie Boogie, but if you want to do him all purple, that's totally fine too. So I'm carefully going around his mouth and eyes because I want to leave those white. If you want to, you could cover those up and then just paint over with white afterwards. But I found that it's difficult to paint white over black, and you would need several layers. So that's why I decided to just go around those borders. So that's why I'm using a smaller brush to get in those details. And make sure that your yellow is completely dry before you paint over it with the black. Otherwise it will smudge and combine the black and yellow. So just test it with your finger, make sure it's totally dry first. And then you can just go directly over it with the black. Next, I painted the background mountain with a dark purple. And again, I'm using a smaller brush and going around each pumpkin. Next, I added some highlights. So I mixed in white with that purple, and with a much lighter shade of purple than what I painted before, I added a highlight along the ridge of that background mountain. And then I'm going to do the same with the Oogie Boogie mountain. So I'm adding a light purple around each edge so that he stands out a little bit from the black background. Then I just blended those borders in with the black. So I chose a medium shade of purple, kind of just went over the border and blurred together the colors. Next, I'm going to fill in Jack and Zero. So I just checked again that my yellow is completely dry. Got some fresh black, and I'm using this very, very fine pointed small brush. And again, I'm going to check that my background is totally dry before I place my hand down on it so that I don't smudge it. So again, just carefully going around those borders. I keep checking my reference picture in front of me, and just take your time with filling in those little details. Next for 0, so I'm gonna get a small dot of white paint on my palette. I'm washing my brush off really well. It might take a few washes to get all of that black out. You want it completely clean for the next layer of white. Same thing, just take your time with filling in those small little details. Next, I'm gonna mix some gray for Oogie Boogie's face in the mountain. So I'm just gonna do a really, really light gray. If you want to leave it just white paper, that's totally fine too, but I just wanted some texture in there. So just mix some white with a tiny little dot of black. So black is super overpowering to white, so you really just need the smallest little amount. Next, to fill in the pumpkins or whatever details you did in that distant mountain. So to mix orange, I'm going to mix a tiny little dot of red into yellow. So same thing with the black. Red is very overpowering to yellow, so you just need the smallest amount to mix an orange. And I'm using my very fine tipped brush to fill in the pumpkins. And I decided to add a few extra little pumpkins in there too. I added some detail lines in the pumpkins with just some darker orange or red. So again, I'm just going over the ridges of the pumpkins with a darker shade. I also decided to add some highlights to the pumpkins, so I'm just using that bright yellow, adding some little dots of light that would be reflected from the moon. And the last details on the pumpkins is just adding the stems using black. Just a few last details. I'm going over 0 again with white. You often need to do 2 layers if you're doing white over any other color so it shows up better. And also adding a few highlights in his face. So just a few little white thin lines. This part's totally optional, of course, as is everything in your painting, but I decided that I wanted to add some stars, so I'm just going in with my fine tip brush and just adding little bundles and scattered stars throughout. When you feel like you have completed your painting, let it dry completely and then very carefully and slowly peel off the tape. If your paper starts to rip or the tape starts to rip or it's not peeling very well, try starting from the other side. That often helps. Don't forget to always sign your work. You can practice your signature on a separate page first if that's helpful, and I often add the year as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you had fun and like how your painting turned out. See you next time.